Here in this case, I listed the manner of death as homicide because we had police investigation that there was no evidence that this was a natural death. There was no evidence that this was an accidental death, and there was no evidence that this was a suicidal death. So it was apparent that he was shot by another individual. Therefore, we relayed to the coroner to sign the death certificate as cause of death, gunshot wound of torso, and manner of death homicide, because that was the reasonable conclusion to make given the facts that we had.
That was forensic pathologist Stephen Atkinson. He works for the Georgia Bureau of Investigations, and he's telling the jury about what he found regarding how Gary Farris died. Now, Farris was a prominent attorney in Atlanta, Georgia. It wasn't until he was found dead and charred in a burn pit on his own property. Now, a year after his body was discovered, it's then that his wife Melody was charged with his murder, and she's on trial. And since that trial has begun, there's been a lot of discussion about the family dynamics. They had 4 adult children. There have been a lot of them on the stand, and the state has made it known through those witnesses that Melody had a long history of affairs while she was still married and living with her husband, Gary. But the defense has fired back, making it clear Gary had a few extramarital affairs of his own. Today, 2 different paramours took the stand. Melody's former lover, Ted Wiley, and Gary's former legal assistant, Angela Phillips. Both of them had testimony in front of this jury about what they know about the parties in this case. But is this testimony that the jury will find impactful? And who will they believe more? And what effect, if any, will these witnesses have on what the jury has to do in their looming deliberations? So let's go back inside of the courtroom now and listen together, beginning with Ted Wiley's testimony.
Good morning.
Morning.
You do not want to be here today, do you?
No, sir.
That's fair. We've subpoenaed you to come in from Alabama, is that right?
Yes, sir. We would see each other at Christmas and birthdays and Thanksgiving and things at Sherry's mother's.
Now, again, I'm not trying to embarrass you, but at some point, did you have a romantic relationship with the defendant?
Yes, sir.
And when did that start?
I can't tell you the exact dates, but it was probably in 2008 or 10, somewhere in that range.
And when y'all would meet and come together, where would y'all meet?
But she's usually coming through town, either going to her friend Sheila's Hutchinson's home, or she would be going to visit her mom at the hospital.
And how long did this romantic affair go on?
Probably 3 or 4 years.
And during that time, do you know whether or not Gary knew about the relationship?
I don't think anyone actually knew about it ever until this happened.
And it was after this that it came out?
I think it did. Then they had were suspicious and things, but I don't think that they actually knew. They had no knowledge of it.
And to be clear, it was an intimate relationship more than just friends, is that right?
Yes, sir.
How many times do you think, how often would you see each other when y'all were together, you and the defendant?
We would see each other at that particular time. Before that time, we'd only see each other Christmas and Thanksgiving, but at that time, we might see each other twice a month.
During the time, did the defendant write you checks for things?
She did help me with payroll once or twice.
And how much money during that time did she give you?
It was a few $1,000s to make payroll.
Would it be closer to $10,000 or closer to a few $1,000s?
It could have been 6,000 or 8,000, somewhere like that, to make payroll.
Is it closer to $10,000 or closer to $15,000? What do you remember?
I'm sure it's closer to 10 than 15. I don't know that.
And she would write you personal checks for this?
She has.
Nothing quite as awkward for a witness as having to come in and talk about an extramarital affair in a murder trial that you don't have anything to do with the crime, but you're still being called in. Let's bring in our think tank to talk about what we are seeing in this trial. Still with us, trial attorney Kelly Hyman, trial attorney Rick King, and deputy public defender Philip Dubé. Rick, I mean, this is the most awkward kind of testimony, it seems, because this guy doesn't want to be there. Probably did not expect in a million years he'd be called in for something like this. He's also also an old boyfriend. Is it piling on for the prosecution to bring in someone who was not even with the defendant at the time of this crime?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it doesn't really move the needle that much. This is just for me, just irrelevant nonsense that they're trying to, as you said, pile on to try to get some effect out of the fact that she might have been unfaithful. But I think on the other side, there's information that he was equally as unfaithful. So I don't know that this is moving the needle for the jury.
Philip, what do you think? Because we know that it's in fact a jury is going to think perhaps some sort of way about Melody Farris. Perhaps we as lawyers know that shouldn't be what they're focused on, but it does make a juror feel some kind of way about a woman who has been with someone else all of these years.
Well, I think there's really two issues for me. Number one, in the state of Georgia, family courts tend to reward the non-cheating spouse when it comes to the division of marital assets at the time of divorce. And there are situations where the cheating spouse actually gets no or little alimony. So if she would have filed for a divorce, it's very possible she could have ended up with significantly less than she would get, had she had survived him and just acquired everything through probate. Additionally, this is a classic case why motive evidence is not required to be proven by the prosecution, because there's so many millions of possibilities as to why somebody would want to commit a crime such as murder. And there's so many subjective, plausible reasons for doing it, And what happens is the jury loses sight of the elements of a crime that the prosecution has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt separate from the motive, and they end up putting too much weight on it. So it almost amounts to character assassination. And to be fair, it would be a shame for her to go down on this murder merely because she was having an affair. I don't think it's enough. So far, I'm not seeing a gun in her hand. I don't see any evidence of GSR on her hands. I'm not seeing anything to connect her to the murder, only to his assets.
You're right. There are several motives, it seems, that the state could go with in this case. And Kelly, to Rick's point, we do have a situation where she wasn't the only one cheating in this relationship. So if the defense can say, hey, this was an open marriage, does that annihilate what the state is trying to prove with these witnesses?
A two-way street. Potentially what's good for the goose is also good for the gander as well. But when you look at this from a perspective that a lot of people, the jury could be really turned off by the fact that, hey, here's this person in this marriage and they're having an affair. However, on the other side of the coin is that he had the affairs as well, and that it was an open relationship. So in other words, it's going to be a wash for both sides.
Yeah, let's listen to the other person who took the stand. That's Angela Phillips. She was a legal assistant for Gary Farris. She described the nature of this romantic relationship, but she hedged a bit on some of the answers. Let's watch.
He was a shoulder that I leaned on, and then unfortunately there were a couple of instances where, long hours, sometimes alcohol involved, things crossed a line.
And it became physical.
Yes.
How long would you say that the physical relationship lasted?
Well, it wasn't an ongoing thing. It wasn't like planned. A few occurrences maybe over the course of a year and a half, maybe.
Did it extend beyond the 90s?
Oh, definitely not.
You mentioned that you guys did have a romantic relationship.
I wouldn't call it romantic.
You stated in one of that you kissed. You kissed multiple times, right? And then you told, I believe, Detective Kuykendall that you can't remember whether you actually had sexual intercourse with him or not.
Right.
Was that correct? You can't remember?
I can't.
Right. And you guys would meet up and go to hotels, yes?
No, there was a hotel there was a hotel connected to the office.
At the Hyatt or? Georgian Terrace?
No, I don't remember the name of it.
Okay. But you stated that you couldn't remember if you actually had sexual intercourse with him.
No, it was not. I don't recall ever having intercourse, no.
Did you know how Gary felt about Melody having affairs?
Well, yes.
And how was that?
Well, I mean, he was obviously not happy about it. Especially since there were multiples. I remember the first time, and I don't know that this turned into an affair. I just remember him leaving the office sick one time. This is at least 25 years ago, because she'd gotten an email from some man talking about her legs and her red painted toenails. I know that he talked about changing his beneficiary information, that he did not want her to get another penny of his money because of the way she had wasted it and kept cheating.
All right, a lot from Angela Phillips there. The think tank still with us. Rick King, what does she do you think, as a witness? Because she says their affair was in the 90s. She did think that Gary Farris may have someone else, but she also testified that she heard Gary say he thought he was being poisoned.
Yeah, she gave a lot of information. For me, she just didn't come off credible in the sense that she said that she didn't remember if she had sex with him or not, and to one lawyer, and then in the other to the other attorney, she said that they were intimate. So it depends on how she defines intimacy. But to say that I don't recall, I think comes off less credible.
Yeah, that was a bit of a fishy moment in terms of what she remembered and didn't remember, but it was in the 90s. So Philip DeBay, if this person had an affair in terms of the defendant more recently than her husband, is the jury going to split hairs that perhaps she was the one in these active affairs and his were from the 90s and maybe one more?
Oh, come on. How could she not remember if she fooled around with her boss? Who's kidding who here? You know, and frankly, if they didn't, was it even really an affair? You know, it comes off a little glee clubbish to me, like kids who are just going steady in school. Well, what does that mean? They're holding hands, they give each other a peck on the cheek, or they might give each other one wet kiss now and then. If you want to call that an affair, fine. But to me, it doesn't even come close to ringing like a true adult sexual affair. If anything, it sounds a little childlike, frankly. Now, having said that, I did find certain things about her to be quite authentic. So, for example, she never once said, you know, that Melody wanted to knock him off, or he wanted to knock her off, or they were trying to hire a hitman to kill one another. There was nothing like that, you know. But I will say, though, that the evidence about her trying to poison him is pretty damning. But if you really think about it, there's no proof. There's no forensics. I don't think there was any medical testimony, forensic testimony about it. It was just coming through the hearsay of out-of-court declarants, which I think the jury should disregard. And frankly, this is a classic example of why hearsay is inadmissible at a trial. Juries put too much weight on it when there's nobody really there officially to corroborate it and to confirm it.
Yeah, it is coming in through these other witnesses, yeah. But you're right, he hasn't faced any charges for poison, or Melody rather hasn't faced any charges for poisoning, but the jury is hearing about it. They heard it through the kids saying, hey, he had some cookies that tasted funny. We have to leave it there because even though we have those two paramours on the stand, there's one major one that we haven't heard from yet, and that's Rusty. He was named in the indictment in this case and was talked about through the children on the stand. Up next, we have more testimony about these affairs, and this time from her own daughter.
When everything had been kind of sectioned off and pieces of the remains were being placed on a table, and there was a section that was identified as a part of the chest cavity, and I saw something that was inconsistent with the rest of the burned and charred material. Looked almost like a pencil eraser in there, and pointed it out to forensics, and it was identified as a projectile from a bullet, from a cartridge.
That was Lieutenant Charles Westbrook. He's with the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office, and he's recounting the discovery of the bullet fragments in Gary's remains. Now, this was a huge turning point in this investigation, because remember, in this case, the original theory of Gary's death was that he had some sort of medical episode and that he fell into that burn pile, and that's why he died. But there was another turning point in this investigation, and that's the evidence that was uncovered about Rusty Barton, the boyfriend of the defendant. And there's a charge that was made against Melody Farris for making a false statement to police when she allegedly told them that that relationship with Barton had ended a year ago. And then they found out, they say, it was still going on. We heard about Rusty Barton through the testimony of the daughter of the victim and the defendant, Emily, who testified yesterday about Melody, her mother, taking her boyfriend to her wedding.
Rusty Barton came to the wedding. I knew he was invited. My mom included him on her guest list. He was there, and at that point we were kind of aware that maybe something more was going on with him, between her, my mom and Rusty, and he came to the wedding, and from what I understand, they were like dancing together, like canoodling, if you will, during the reception.
All eyes are on whether or not Rusty is going to be taking the stand in this case. There he is at the wedding, sometimes standing next to Gary Farris. And Emily described it as awkward. There were times when some of her siblings were upset that their mother was dancing with Rusty. Let's bring back in the think tank, trial attorney Kelly Hyman, trial attorney Rick King, and Deputy Public Defender Philip Dubé. Philip, when Rusty takes the stand, it's going to be a big moment in that courtroom. Do you think this case makes it or breaks it on the back of Rusty? Because he's also the one who reportedly told police at one point, Melody called me to say the body is on the burn pile, and that was before the 911 call.
Oh, yeah. If he takes the stand and says that, that's the nail in the coffin. I mean, that really is the smoking gun, no pun intended, in this case. And we haven't had that at this point, you know? If he takes the stand and quotes her as having said that, it is game over. And I think all the stuff regarding the sons being up to it, everything that the sons sought to gain from this, the fact that they were taking money from the father, all of that will go by the wayside once they hear that she concocted this whole thing. But we'll see if he takes a stand, because frankly, if I were him, I might not, unless I was given a full grant of use and transactional immunity, because you never know. They could swoop in after this trial and try to get him for being some type of an accessory after the fact.
That's true, because we have this lingering question about how did she move the body. Kelly, now Rusty we've learned that he has recanted at times that statement, so it really could be a wash on the stand. I mean, he's going to be confronted with his original statement, but your thoughts on Rusty and when he takes the stand?
Motive. He's definitely going to play a key role if he takes a stand, because people always wonder, why did someone commit the crime? Why did someone do this? Why did they want the other person dead? And he is the perfect reason why, allegedly, because they were still having an affair, and the motive could be that she wanted to be with him. However, why not get a divorce? I mean, they both seemed unhappy in their marriage. They both allegedly had an open relationship. Why not get a divorce from one another and go through this? But if Rusty takes a stand, definitely can see fireworks when he testifies.
Rick King, what do you think about this case and why there was no divorce? Because it does seem like they were living these separate lives, were disputing about how to give money to the children. I mean, it just seemed like chaos in that house.
I think Philip Dubé broke that wide open because of the divorce laws in Georgia. I think if one of the parties finds out that, or is able to be determined to be more culpable in the affair area, then they get less money. And I think neither party wanted to lose that amount of money. And sometimes couples just stay together.
Philip, real quick about the false statement charge that Melody is facing. It has to do with Rusty. Do you think he will plead the fifth? Is that an option for him? If he doesn't want to say anything, I mean, that could make it more difficult for the prosecution.
The only way he can't take the fifth is if they grant him immunity. If they grant him immunity and he refuses to testify, he can be held in contempt. And certainly what they could do maybe is yank the immunity and actually prosecute him for being an accessory after the fact. And they can use his own statements against him. Now, I don't know what evidence they have to show that he may have been involved in a cleanup effort, as opposed to just having personal knowledge of what, if anything, she said or did, because that standing alone does not make you an accessory. But what I find a little odd, and I don't know if the think tank would agree, who in their right mind would continue this dating relationship with a woman who just burned her ex-husband to a crisp? Why would you hang around, right? I mean, who in their right mind? If they truly right? Come on, Rick, you're laughing. Would you date anybody who was doing that to their ex? Who would stick around with that? You could be next.
Not a chance.
She had multiple paramours. She apparently had companionship. Kelly, real quick, should she take the stand?
She should definitely not take the witness stand, especially the fact of her children coming out and saying the stuff that she did. She should sit there and let the state prove the case.
All right, that's all the time we have for now. When it comes to the Melody Farris case, we've got another day of trial tomorrow there in Canton, Georgia. And our thanks to the think tank for being with us this hour, lending your expertise. Kelly Hyman, Rick King, and Philip Dubé. Always a pleasure to talk to you all and break down these cases. When we come back from this break, we're going to reveal something else you need to know. Plus, here's a look at what's coming up in the next hour on Vinnie Politan Investigates. Tonight on Vinnie Politan Investigates, a young mother accused of murdering her 20-month-old son after his remains were recovered in a landfill. The prosecution's case is underway and they have their theory. But tonight we're asking, what is Leilani Simon's defense?
Join Court TV's Vinnie Politan with the latest and breaking true crime stories.
Now, let's look at the other side of all of that.
Vinnie Politan Investigates, coming up next, only on Court TV.
What happened that night? Are you not prepared to take responsibility for any of your crimes?
Interview with a Killer, a Court TV original series. Premieres Sunday, 8/7 Central, only on Court TV.
Welcome back to Closing Arguments. It's now time for us to reveal something else you need to know tonight. Let's take a look at the board. Susan Smith was convicted of a disciplinary violation just a month before her parole eligibility, which is just around the corner. She got the infraction for illegally communicating with a filmmaker and receiving money for her involvement. Now, per South Carolina law, inmates are not allowed to do telephone or in-person interviews. Smith's punishment for this infraction includes the loss of telephone, tablet, and canteen privileges for 90 days. She's, of course, convicted of murdering her 2 young boys by drowning them in a lake in 1994. And it's a case that gained national attention after she first claimed that she had been carjacked by a black man, when in reality, she had strapped them into their car seats and allowed the vehicle to roll into a lake. This is her first infraction since 2015, when she was disciplined for drug use and having sex with a prison guard. And before we go tonight, we want to show you this missing child. Take a look closely at your screen. This is Israel Aaron Levi. Now, Israel is 15 years old. He was last seen on October 2nd in Spokane, Washington. And if you have any information on where Israel is tonight, please call the police department there in Washington at 509-456-2223. And at any time, you can always call 1-800-THE-LOST or 911. If you see anything, say something. Let's see if we can get Israel back to a safe place tonight. Thank you again for joining us on Closing Arguments. I'm Julia Janae, filling in for Vinnie. Don't go anywhere. We do have another hour of live true crime television. Vinnie Politan Investigates is up next.